Welcome to WitchLit, a place to talk about the craft of writing and writing the craft. I'm your host, Victoria Rashke, author, publisher, witch, and nosy Scorpio. WitchLit is a production of Thousand Volt Press. Our small press publishes books we want to see in the world, including Changing Paths by Yvonne Abreu, Conjuring the Commonplace by Lane Fuller and Corey Thomas Hutchison of New World Witchery podcast, and Verona Green, my latest book. Find out more about us and purchase these and other titles at thousandvoltpress.com. Mawiyah Bomani is the author of Conjuring the Calabash, empowering women with hoodoo spells and magic, and an award-winning writer, educator, and spirit woman. Mawiyah is an 8th-generation witch, Iguan medium, and priestess of Oya in the Yoruba system of spirituality. She is also editor-in-chief of the Culture and African Traditional Spirituality e-zine, Oya and Zoro. Mawiyah is the host of Fish Heads and Red Gravy, a podcast dedicated to celebrating marginalized people of the esoteric occult world. Her writings have appeared in numerous magazines, including the Crab Orchard Review, Dark Arrows, and Catch the Fire. She has written several plays, including Spring Chickens, which won her the Southern Black Theater Festival's 2012-23 Playwright of the Year Award. She is also the Critical Mass 8 Literary Award winner and a Cat Artist Residency recipient. Mawiyah currently lives, writes, and conducts Orisha rituals, spiritual consultations, workshops, house cleansings, and divinations, messed up divinations of all words, in both northern and southern Louisiana. Mawiyah Bomani, welcome to WitchLit.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I am so excited to have you on. As listeners know, we get to talk a little bit beforehand, and I have already told you how much I love your book, and I can't wait to talk about it. But our first question for everyone is, in this age of social media and podcasting and everything else, why write? Why still write books?
I think early on in my life, I started loving stories. And so just my love of stories, being very young, my grandfather would always come over and he'd start telling all these stories. My brother and my sister, they wanted to go out and play. But I just got, really entranced by the stories. And a lot of the stories were, based in sort of like an occult theme. Mm-hmm. And then other stories were just, sort of like fairy tales, but with a different twist. And I just really enjoyed that. And so I wanted to write stories so I could tell him the next time he would come over. And I just fell in love with it. Writing poetry was probably one of the first avenues. I did get a creative writing degree. And so I just always enjoyed writing. Just merging the two, I think, for me, it was just something that always was there. I always wrote, even my poetry had that stem that began in the occult type arena. And so it's just always been my grandfather who's always been the reason why I started writing. And so I still write because of that. I can't do anything else. I feel like I have to write.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I mean, and storytelling, I think, is a root to so many cultures that unfortunately we kind of lose, or we've turned over to someone else to tell the stories for us.
Right.
So I love that that's how you started writing. So when did that start? Like, when did you start writing for yourself?
Well, in second grade, I started writing poetry. And then I remember in high school, wanting to do like more mystery type writing. And so I started doing that. And we would have like writing workshops at the school, got into college, undergrad, and started doing a lot more of that. And then joined a writing workshop group, through college, different colleges around the city. And then we just took off from there. We would have performances. We performed at the National Black Theater Festival. And then we would, just have different things inside the city. But it was always a lot of exposure, trying to bring other people into it. I taught creative writing in high school. So it's just always there. I would work with the kids and then I would still find time to do my own work writing. And so that's why, that's what really happened for me. I just, as far as magic goes, my poetry has always been that way. And then my short stories and then the plays. And so it's just easy. I just fall into it from, if I'm working on usually the book, the pandemic was the reason that, came about. I had a lot of time. I wasn't teaching in the classroom. we were doing Zoom, but I mean, really, how much, teaching can you do over Zoom? So a lot of that time I filled up with just, jotting down some ideas and still working with clients, having lots of clients. Even during that time, people were dealing with, their marriages, things like that. And so I found myself doing a lot of that work. And then I wanted to just jot down some ideas on how I could actually help people, in a longer distance away from me. And that's just how it formulated. That started to be my, my baby, so to speak. And so I just went with it. And, it just felt natural. And it felt like, it didn't feel like I was doing something to make a lot of money. It felt like I was really trying to put a product out that would help women, and men and our elders and our children, as you see from the book, but, just to give us a basis in all of that and try to help us figure out how to get out of how we were feeling at that time and even still now. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And so your bio mentions the one play, Spring Chickens, but you've written a lot of plays.
Yeah.
From your website, I learned you've written a lot of plays.
I always I love Spring Chickens because of the award, but yeah, there have been other plays, and Spring Chickens itself dealt with an older couple, trying to deal with the husband losing his job. And it still has some of that magic in it, how to deal with racism in the South, and dealing with it with hoodoo, so that was a point in there. And so I just felt like that was a teachable moment as well. Because a lot of people that came out, they were thinking that, hoodoo was this dead art form that we don't talk about anymore. We don't need it. And they saw that it's something that's always within us. It's our folk magic, and it's not something to shun because, we don't customarily think of initiations and things like that with hoodoo. But it is still very necessary, and empowering. So, yeah.
And I love too that the idea that, the magic part of our lives, the occult part of our lives, like it's just also part of everything, right? So like having a play that's about an older couple, the husband losing his job, but hoodoo plays a role in it. Like I love this idea of the occult permeating fiction in a way that it's just there. It's just part of the world. It's not even necessarily the focus of the story.
Yeah, because so often, we have people who tell our stories, but they're not really invested in the culture of it. And so everything gets lumped in, like when American Horror Story, when they did the New Orleans, and then it's like, this is, supposed to be Papa Legba. And then it was more Baron Samedi, than anything. And so other people who are looking at it are like, no, not quite, So when we tell our stories and we can give it, the flavor that it deserves, and it's out there and it's out there the right way. And so for me, since a lot of things that are not Christian are very much demonized, it gives it a chance where people can actually see the role it can play in, a movement like, fighting racism, like civil rights, things like that. And so, and with that, you can see that it's not to be feared. It is really something that is very much, helpful. And we could still use that today. And I found that, like I said before, a lot dealing with the pandemic, people were really feeling like they were at a spiritual disconnect, and so you can have that power for yourself at home. You can create that. You don't need to go to a building. Your building can be within you, and so it was just about showing that for me, because so often we just get lost and people felt like, since I'm not in front of a preacher or a priest, then what am I going to do? How am I going to survive this? And so that was partly my goal with it. And, just to show how it can fit into your life, and you're the priest, you're the preacher, you're in control.
And I think what you said about telling your story, like I think like American Horror Story, right? Like it's set in New Orleans. I don't know if anybody from New Orleans actually wrote on that show.
Right.
I don't know that. But I do feel like I think there's more understanding now than previously in the occult world. But I think outside that bubble that we kind of live in, sometimes people still conflate like all of ATRs and American Black folk magic into like New Orleans voodoo. Like that's is everything. And I'm like, there's so much more.
Right. So, and it's easier to to sell the horror side of it by just looping it all together. I understand that, and it makes it more scarier than if you were to to talk about it the way it really is. It takes all the mystery out of it. But I think that, yeah, they just loop it all together. And that is very problematic, especially for practitioners who, even if it's not, even if you're, you practice Lukumi or you practice New Orleans Vodun, you still don't want them all looped in together.
Right.
You want them each to have their own space, and that way we can really understand what's going on within each, arena, as opposed to just saying it's all this way and this, and because it's not this, then it's bad, and things like that. So yeah, usually people do that. And it's a tough pill to swallow, but you try to teach them, no, it's not the same thing,
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and one of the things I really enjoyed about your book is you kind of get out of the way really early, like who this book is for and can white people practice this magic? And you're like, yes, but here's what you have to do.
Right.
And
right.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think it's something that people, I think occasionally, because people have been told, oh, this is a closed practice, I'm not going to buy this book.
Right.
I'm like, but that doesn't help support people, make sure we get more of these books out there. So
I always tell people we all have folk magic. We all have folk magic from our different cultures. And when we think about hoodoo as being Black people's folk magic, right, we think about it in terms of, enslavement in this country, trying to figure out how to merge what knowledge we still had of our African past with the knowledge that we're blending in with these other groups of people from Africa who are intermingled, and we can't speak the same language, but we do know that we had another, a beginning, or another belief system. And so using what we have here in this country, using, specs of our belief system that we can still control or hold dear to us, it merged all together in a way to try to help us have some type of liberation over the situation that we were in. And so I always say, yeah, you can, but you need to understand that some things might not work out for you. You always ask. And that's why I list those steps in the book. But if you really want to, just, I guess, show that you are appreciative of another person's culture, you can still purchase the book. You can still, buy the book for someone else. There's some things in there that you can still do, but just be honest about the things that you really feel like this doesn't resonate with me, and so I'm gonna acknowledge that this is, a practice, but I'm gonna go to the next page or the next series of events, things in the book. And so I just think that it's not to say, oh, you just can't do it because you're white. It's to say that there are some things that are really, really ingrained within the past that, that your connection to is not that, not that close. You don't have that kind of just a beginning in that place. So, you have to step back and know when to say, okay, I accept that, I understand it, and I'm going to allow that to be for those people,
Yeah. When this airs, the episode with Ben Stimson will have aired right before it. And he, wrote Ancestral Whispers that we were talking about, because he also brings up kind of cultural appropriation, appreciation in and the way he put it from, his teachers was the spirits are going to be confused. Like if you don't have a relationship with them and you just say, I'm going to step into this and I'm instantly a hoodoo practitioner, the spirits of that practice are going to be confused because you don't know how to introduce yourself. You don't know how to do that. And your own ancestors are going to be confused because they don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
That's not their reality either. And I was like, that's such a great way to put it. And I think a way that puts it that people who can hear the phrase closed practice and get combative about it. It's like, but are you benefiting your ancestors by doing something that you don't understand and they won't understand?
Exactly. And even, just like you say, the ancestors as well as the spirits, they're looking at that and they're wondering, who are you? Because if we think about it, some of these spirits sprang up during this time, of enslavement. And so they're thinking you're supposed to be here and, what I'm saying, and not here in front of me. There's this situation, this hierarchy where you're not supposed to cross, because that's how we came about, to help these people with this. And so I don't know if someone would really want to just, say, I'm going to do it anyway and think that it's going to turn out well for them. A lot of times it does not, but there are ways to work with it, to even say, from your standpoint, that I'm appreciative, as well as I'm sorry for, what you had to endure. Right. And so I try to talk a lot about that with people, just writing letters, saying I'm sorry. And you lay that out, or you can burn that and use that as a focal point to try and, see if this is a practice that you want to do, or rather still just figuring out what is the folk magic of your culture and doing that instead. But that's not to say that you can't still have the book, buy the book for someone, things like that, and find something in the book that, would work for you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can still do those things. I definitely believe that. It doesn't matter what color you are.
Yeah. And I think for me, like coming from, Appalachian background on my mom's side, like, people tend to whitewash Appalachia.
Right.
And I was like, no, it really is a mix of, Germans and Scots and English people who came and the Black people that they brought here against their will and the indigenous people they tried to run out of the mountains. They're all combined, it's all combined in that way. And I think acknowledging that and honoring the source of those Appalachian magics that do have, that did originate with the people who came from the different cultures in Africa and from the indigenous cultures there is important and will make you a better practitioner.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah. In New Orleans, we have the Mardi Gras Indians, and the point of honoring that is to understand the connection between the Africans as well as the native people. And so, we remember that a lot of times those First Nation people helped us to escape, slavery. And so that's why you consistently see those practices, those celebrations spring up, and people will run out their house. They'll leave their pots on, just to go and see when, the Indians are passing it, to go out there and just, to dance with them. It's that whole remembering of that connection between the two, the intermarrying of the two cultures and just to constantly celebrate that. And so that way that is not forgotten. Yeah. And in hoodoo, we use a lot of the cayenne pepper, which is a tool that they used oftentimes, put it on the bottom of your foot so that when the dogs were trying to follow the enslaved people, they lost the scent, because of that. Yeah. And so that is used often. And we always remember that and retell those stories, before you actually engage in it or use it, or even when you're sprinkling it in your hand, you're remembering that story. So you're transferring that energy. So now it's not being used to cook food, it's being used for ritual purposes. And so, yeah.
Oh, I love that. And I think, one of the things specifically about your book that I think is good for everyone, especially coming at it from, a feminine presenting person in our culture, is there's so much in the book about taking your power back to yourself and not, giving away to lovers or institutions or your boss or, this is about who you are as a person. And I think everyone needs that message.
Yeah, because I do a lot of spiritual work for women. And that's always the top, during the pandemic, it was a lot about, finances. We were all concerned about that, but any other given day, it's about, lovers and, the boss is, trying to move up and things like that. And so how do we do that? How do I do that and still remain feminine, but still at the same time, be in control, not feel like just because I'm a woman, then I have to just be, a doormat, for anybody, and I wanted women to understand that you can be powerful, as well as feminine, and you can be loved and still be a stern boss, or still be in control of your own destiny. And I wanted those kind of spells where you could do those things quickly and still move on. That was one of the big things too. I wanted things where people could wake up in the morning and, it could just fit into their routine, and so it's part of my day, but it doesn't take apart, just take everything to do it. I always make the analogy about ceremonial magic. You got to get your robes and everything on, and then you have to get ready for it. But I wanted it to be something that empowered you and made you feel like you were doing magic, and you could still be about your day. No one has to know.
Yeah, so, sometimes you don't have to have as much kit to make things happen.
Right. Sometimes we just don't have time. We just don't have the time to that we would want to devote to a larger practice. You see all the people on the internet and TikTok with all these things just laid out, and you're thinking, who has that kind of time? You just want to be able to do something and know you did it, feel good about the fact that you did engage in your magic that day. And then you still were able to go about your day, whatever that is.
Yeah. For folks who haven't gotten to see the book yet, when this comes out, the book will have been out for, I think, about a month. And but I love the Juju on the Fly part of it's at the end of the chapter is like, really, like if you've got 5 minutes, you can do some magic.
Because when I talk to women, they'll say, well, in the morning I have this, or before bed I have about 5 minutes. And so I was trying to think about some things. And so I said, well, you always want to do it first, right? So I'm like, well, I'm going to do some of these things, right? And I was like, oh, okay, all right. I can include that, and so I felt like, a lot of the women who I would prescribe it for, who would do rituals, they would say, that was really good. I like that. I wish everything could be like 5 minutes, So just giving you something that you could do and walk away and feel like you were still, magical. You don't feel guilty about not, getting up in the morning, lighting a candle or incense, and, you're still able to do it. They manage your kids, your husband, your pets, whatever.
All the thousands of things that hear a day.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Well, and the other thing I like in the longer spells, rituals, kind of workings, I love the voice of the incantations. Because I do think, especially when you're talking about like ceremonial magic and more, I guess, magic that takes more kit.
Right.
You also, like, people say, well, should I say this in Latin or English or whatever? Yeah, and I'm like, to me, what language does your spirit speak? What language do your ancestors speak?
Right. Like, and that's another thing with people too. I know like a lot of people, when they come into Lucamia, Santeria, they always, worry about that, They'll say, well, if I don't speak Spanish, if I don't speak it right, will they still understand, And I always tell people, if you don't feel comfortable, then read the English, It's still going to work, But that's always a given, Folks are worried about getting it right so that it can go where it needs to go, And so it doesn't matter if your spirit is in the right place, your heart is in the right place, then they'll understand it. I always say when you say it in English, it'll go to them in their language,
Yeah.
So yeah.
Like spiritual translation, instant. Yes. Yeah. I love that.
Not Google.
Yeah. Because I feel like, even for me, when people talk about like Latin is like this, very magical language, blah, 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 I was like, well, magic existed before Latin.
Right. Yeah, I went to Catholic school, so I'm like, yeah, that was the language you learned. So
you went to Catholic school in New Orleans.
And that was another reason. I was like, no, I want the incantations to be, I want you to feel like, you can say it, you can do it. I didn't want it to be too heavily laden magic or too, I just wanted it to flow, just like we would normally talk, so that it'll be easier and for people to want to do,
Yeah. Well, and I think, for me, like, I understand that like rhyming has powerful like memory kind of stuff and like it can be helpful in that way. But because I've studied poetry, like I have a hard time with rhyming sometimes because because you did an MFA too, that like, culturally at this point, our poetry doesn't rhyme. Like English poetry doesn't rhyme. That's really not how people write. So I think that, I have an academic hang up about it, even though I understand the power of rhyming. So I love that yours are like, no, this is how I would talk. This is how I would tell a friend. And this is how I'm going to tell the spirits of my ancestors what I need. Like I would tell a girlfriend on the phone.
Right. Some of my favorite authors, that's how they wrote. They would, just like we're having a conversation. I remember when I met, no, I didn't meet her, but I remember it's Jackie Shange. I didn't meet her. And that was one of the things she was saying, you need to write, in the way you would talk, there is no, I have to write it this way. This is a writer's language. No, you write it the way you talk and people will feel it because it will resonate with them more. They'll feel like you really are getting in tune with the spirit of the story and of them, so yeah. So for me, that's just the way it is. I just think that it'll pull more people in and then they won't feel like they're being talked at or preached to. And then, you put a lot of yourself into it. I always try to tell people, if you meet a spiritual practitioner and they come across like, their life is perfect, then you want to run, because we all
say anyone, spiritual practitioner, if anyone comes across that way, should probably run.
Right. And because, we all have problems, all of us, we have, sometimes our kids don't listen, sometimes, and it's just a lot of different things. And so, talking to somebody, you don't want them to talk to you like we're in the Elizabethan era, you want them to talk to you, like they really feel you. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I was just thinking, talking about like, advice from other writers, like you have an acknowledgement. I think it's in the acknowledgements. I can't remember if it was in the acknowledgement or in the book, talking about like all of the other writers, who've done this work. But like who are your, like, who do you look at as inspiration and like advice for writing for you? Like who are those people for you?
Well, like I said, when I was in undergrad, we had the workshop, the Writers Workshop, No More Literary Society. And so we met lots of writers. So I guess for me, people like J. California Cooper is my top. And even though, she didn't write occult work, but her stories were always this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from the moment you opened the book, you felt like you were sitting on your porch, and you were listening to her tell you exactly what's happening. So for me, her, as far as poetry, it would be I loved her poetry. I just love, even though a lot of it is really dark, but I love the fact that of not being afraid to tell even those stories, and so I think that all of that we get to learn, about our culture. We get to learn about, how we start to, assess problems, how we problem solve and things like that. And it just becomes a clear picture of the world. One of the first Patakis or stories in Santeria that one of my teachers told was about this guy who went to a diviner. And so he goes to the diviner, and this diviner he's really popular man. And so the guy goes to him and he's asking him, why isn't his life like it should be? And he's like, I just, I do everything. I go to work every day and I still don't have a perfect life. I don't have enough money out of. And so the guy, he doesn't say anything to him. The diviner just points to him to sit down on the mat. And so he sits on the mat. And so he sits too. And so he pulls out all his tools and then he pulls the egg out and he puts it in the center of the mat. And so the guy's still fussing, right? He's like, you're not even answering me. He's just going on and on about his life. And so he tells him, so they watch. So he's quiet and he's watching the egg. And then out of the egg, a little chick pops out. And the chick starts to defecate all over the place. And so the man is looking like, what is this? And he tells him, life is messy. He says, that's the way it's supposed to be. Each and every day we have to reassess. We have to figure out what we're going to do. But in general, it's always going to be messy, And so I think about that often when I write, I don't know where the story's going to go, how it's going to, turn out, but it still has to be told, And so for some people, the telling will clean up their mess, and for other people, they'll just figure out how to get through that and fall into the next messy situation. But the story's out there, they do with it what they see fit.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, being a fiction writer, primarily, like, I feel like, there's so much magic in telling those stories, like whether they're completely made up or they're based on pre-existing stories or ideas or myths or whatever. Like, just for me as a writer, like there's a therapeutic aspect to it to tell those stories and get those, voices out of my head kind of thing.
Yeah, I feel that same way too. I feel like it has to be said. And sometimes you think, this is not my story, and somebody else will read it and they'll really feel it. They'll say, well, I remember once I wrote this poem about this lady whose husband was having an affair. And I read it at this reading and it was prose. It did not rhyme at all. And people were coming up afterwards and they were like, oh, we feel so sorry for you. And I'm like, oh, no, it's not me. It's not me. And some people were coming up and they were like, that's my story. That happened to me. So I just think that it has to be out there. And you never know, like you say, whose therapy it's going to be. It might be yours one day and another day it may be for someone else. So, but I always feel like, they have to come out. I get up in the middle of the night, and I'll start writing. Because you just have your toilet paper, whatever you got,
It is. I have become a big fan of the Notes app on my iPhone. Because I'm like, I have this thought, but I really need to sleep. So I need to get this thought and remember it. And sometimes in the morning you look at it and you're like, that was crap.
Right, right, right. I've done that with poetry, right? You're like,
Yeah.
oh no, get that out of here.
That sounded a lot better in my head last night
Right,
at 3
right.
or, at 2 a.m. or whatever. Yeah. So you're also writing YA stuff, right?
Yes, I am.
So
Mhm.
how is that transition? Because I mean, you have a very frank voice, obviously, in this book, which I
Right,
so
right.
appreciate. I so appreciate. And I know that YA, though it has grown up, I would say, over the
Yeah,
last few
yeah,
years, like
yeah.
it's still you're writing to a younger audience, and you do
Mhm.
have to couch things differently. So how is that process like for you?
Yeah. For me, I talked to my daughters, my youngest daughter at the time when I first started doing it. And so it was a lot of, look, let's check out this chapter. I tried to go chapter by chapter. They would say, oh, we don't say that, but we say this, kind of thing. But I understood the language because teaching, I've taught, from K all the way up to 12th grade. So I understand that portion of it. I guess a lot of it for me is allowing the problem to settle a bit for younger people, because you know how they are. And, we're older, so we try to think about how to already solve this, as opposed and in that telling too much, And so that has been I guess the part for me. I always think, well, I've been a kid before, I've been younger before, but then, the way that they manage things today, especially in social media age and all of this, is a lot different. So that's been the biggest part, just trying to really to get into their head and get out of my head. That's been the biggest part of it all. That. But having the kids, like I say, having that my daughters, they'll constantly go through and say, okay, yeah, that we do, that we would do. Yeah.
Well, it's good you have built-in beta readers. That's awesome.
Yes.
Because I do think about my son is almost 30. He'll be 28 next week. And, I look at him and think about he kind of stretched that analog divide. He's a very young millennial, but he kind of stretched it.
Right.
Like he didn't have a cell phone when he was a little kid. He had a cell phone like in junior high.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he had a little bit of an analog childhood, but they have access to so much more information than we did at such a young age. I mean, for good and bad, maybe.
Yeah, for good and bad.
But I just can't imagine having that much access. We had to find things out the slow, hard way, right? You had to get a book out of a library or you had to get someone to tell you.
That's right.
I mean, that's how you got information. And to now just be able to type it in and go, hey, I want to know about hoodoo or witchcraft or whatever. Right. And it's just kind of right there for them, sometimes with not good guides.
Exactly. Because I always still tell people, I'll say, Google something, right? But then I'll still say, you might want to get a library card. You might want to go check something out, because I understand it's quick and easy, but sometimes a lot of that stuff is not even the truth, and it's not written by real practitioners of it, And so I encourage people to, Google, but still go get a book, feel a book, So it is. I think it's a lot different than when we were growing up, I love to be in the library. I was in the library all the time. And now it's even some of the library things, they'll just, for the kids, I see, it's you can get this link, and just go look at the library books, check them out there. And I'm like, no, you want to feel a book, you want to turn those pages. Yeah. So I just, Yeah,
I love the access to ebooks, just the massive amount of access you can get. But there is no feeling quite like the feeling of coming home from the library with an arm full of books. It's just that's a pretty special experience. Yeah. No, totally there with you. Yeah, the library was sanctuary when I was a kid. So
I guess that's another thing too that I worry about, how much of it in terms of being, since they do have that access to just Google the answer to something, how much of that is still, in reading. I know teaching kids myself a lot less, each year want to, take AR tests or get into the AR contests, and so even when you pump it up with things like, okay, at the end of the year, we're going to have a field trip, still they would rather not, and I'm telling kids, if you read Harry Potter, it's worth 30 points, but they still don't want to do it. So I guess that really bothers me, the quick access to things, it takes away from that need to want to hold a book,
Yeah. And I think, again, we were talking a little bit before, and I listen to a lot of audiobooks. Partly, my cat is rubbing his face on the back of the computer. I apologize. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks because I, oftentimes am multitasking, which I know is not the best thing for our brains, but like,
yeah, you gotta do
I'm not always mindful when I'm washing the dishes.
Right.
Sometimes I listen to, and like I think about like how our brains interact with like spoken word versus written word. And to me, like I would never be a person who say, "Oh, you didn't really read a book if you listen to it," because I mean that's an ableist approach, right?
Right.
But I've also like I don't think listening to a book or reading a book is the same as like watching a YouTube video. Like I don't know that your brain engages in the same way.
Right. I agree. I would agree. I think for me, I like to listen to books because it allows me to use a lot of my imagination, because now I'm listening to somebody else read it to me, but I'm still having to focus in on, all of those things that they're talking about, and even if it's something that I don't know, I may stop it and go find out what is that, so I'm still engaging a lot more. Yeah. And so it doesn't matter to me if it's reading it, with the actual book or listening to it. I think that I'm still, pumping myself up, getting the knowledge that I need. So yeah, definitely not the same as watching a video because I'm not really engaged in that.
Yeah. I mean, it is a more passive experience, I think. Right. And I mean, I'm not a psychologist so I don't really know, I understand like the parts of your brain that fire and stuff. Right. But I know that it's different.
I would agree.
Yeah. And I don't know. Interesting. It's just interesting to me, like how much access we have to information and, sometimes how little we take advantage of it.
Yes, that is true. That's true.
Like, information and knowledge is the one thing that will drive out ignorance. And sometimes we still need large doses of that in our culture.
Right. But the news would be a clear example of that. People will believe anything they see there, and not try to do the research, Right.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like when you were talking about, that do I know about this and then I'll stop it and go do it. It's like, I feel like I would be a much faster reader if I could ignore footnotes. But like I have to go down the rabbit hole every time.
Yes. Because you feel like there's something there. There's this inside joke that you don't know about.
Right.
I need to know what they're talking about. So yeah, I will stop it. Even if I'm reading a book, I will stop that book right there. Put my bookmark in there or whatever, and I'm going to figure out what is that? What's that? So yeah.
Yeah, that's why my to-be read list is like 27 pages long in my notebook. I'm like, oh, there's this other book I found reading this book.
Right. Especially if they reference another book, then you're going to that book, then you start reading that book. So yeah.
Yeah, and the never-ending, like Russian dolls of footnotes.
You got to buy more books. So
yeah, I often joke with myself that it's not hoarding if it's books.
No, it's not. It really isn't.
And that even if I don't get to reading it immediately, I still supported that author by buying the book.
There you go.
That's how I, worry about the stack of books that will fall over
make them look nice.
Kill me in my sleep. I will have died happy, right?
There you go.
So for like to kind of get, I guess, back on the writing topic that we're talking about books, but like for you, like what does a good writing day look like? Like, how do you, because I mean, you're a teacher, you have kids, you have a life, like all of us. I mean, maybe not everybody has kids, but how do you make space?
Yeah. I would, anytime I used to try to set aside time and say, okay, I'm going to get up early and do this, or I'm going to do it before I go to bed. And then I decided that that's not what I'm going to do, because then you can start to feel bad, right? If you're too tired and you can't do it, you start to feel less like a writer. So I just, whenever I can, jot something down, whenever something comes to me, I just write it down. And I consider that part of my writing. I try to, I have journals, so I try to fill up at least a couple of pages a day. So as I'm jotting down ideas, if I can fill in 2 pages a day, then I'm good. I feel good about that day. Usually on the weekends where I have a lot more free time, I'll go back and look at it. If something stinks, it's out of here. If it's good, I'll start trying to figure out, well, what is this going to be? Is it going to be a poem? Is it going to be the beginning of a play? Is it the next book? What is this? What does this look like? And I'll just let it go from there, but I don't beat myself up about it. And I really try to, just let it flow, let it fit where it fits, because I have 5 kids, but only one is still at the home. The others are grown. But even with him, being 13, I still want to come home and find out if there's, anything that I need to do. He started this cooking class and the teacher needs all these things. And so every day it's something new. So, I don't want to say, okay, when I get home after I do that, I'm going to start doing this. So I just try to do it throughout the day, and that feels good to me. And it's worked out for me.
Well, and I think it's interesting you said that, because I think one of the things I was thinking about while reading your book and about, reclaiming our power and all of that. And I think as creatives, sometimes we do give away our creative power because we're like, oh, I have to do all of these other things first. Like, I've got to wash the dishes and make sure all the laundry is done and everything's dusted and vacuumed. And like, no, sometimes you just need to sit down and write. The dust will still be there when you're done. It
sure will. I had a teacher, this was years ago, and I used to think about this a lot, but she said, don't wait till you're in your 50s and then become an author. And I thought, oh my God, if I'm not an author before then, it should be right, whatever. But I feel like when it's supposed to happen, it happens, and that was her baggage, trying to dump her stuff on my stuff,
Yes.
I can say that now, right?
Yeah.
But I just feel like, you create your own time, and when you have enough time to do something and when you won't. And there'll be days, where I just, I didn't do it. And that's okay too.
Yeah.
That's still part of my power. I can say that that's okay. Whereas before then I would be agonizing over it. Oh, I didn't do it. So tomorrow I need to write 4 pages, So, but no, it happens when it happens. And if it doesn't, then that's okay.
Yeah. No, I think that's so important, because I think it is really easy, like with anything that you're trying to do, to beat yourself about it, whether it's your practice, your writing, you decide to start running, bless you. I don't know why you do that, but bless you if you want to do that. So just those things, it's like life intervenes.
Yes.
Life intervenes. That's just how, like you said, it's messy. Life is messy. So,
yes.
And beating yourself up doesn't help.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. And, often I think a lot of times, especially as women, we feel like we have to be just as good as the boys, And so we will beat ourselves up about it. We have to have our kids at a certain time. We have to finish school. We have to get this high powered job. We have to do all these things. And then when it doesn't happen in that way, we start to think that we're less feminine. We're less of a woman.
Yeah.
And so, no, not doing that.
Yeah. Well, and I think especially, to live in a culture that, is like capitalism on steroids, in-stage capitalism, whatever you want to call it, to live in that culture and then have all of the other aspects of culture layered on top, like,
how we look,
Protestant
everything.
Work ethic, all of those things on top of that. It's like, no one can live up to all of these things, nor should we.
No. No, but I think, like you say, if it's ingrained in us since we were young, we think that that's what we're supposed to do. Yeah. And it's hard to get out of that. Even when people come into, an African traditional spirituality, they feel like it has to at least resemble Christianity, or I can't be a part of it. We don't do this, or we're not doing that. And, we don't have to dress up. You mean I can get up in the morning and start doing this, and so we start to, it takes a while to peel all that back and to see, no, you don't need all those things to be spiritual. Yeah. It's about your connection with spirituality. It's not about how you look, when you get out there, how many things you can buy, because you may feel one day that you don't need a candle. You don't need incense. You just want to get up and you want to sing or you want to dance, which is why I have a playlist to go with the book, what is it you want to do? And that's still your connection to spirit. So, yeah.
No, I think, oh gosh, all of that. Like, yes, clap, stand up from the back of bleachers and scream, yes, listen to this. Well, and I just think, like, one of the things I have thought about, like, as an author and with the podcast, and like, a lot of people I've talked to, like, everything, capitalism wants to turn everything into a side hustle, right?
Yes.
Like, sometimes the thing you do is just for the thing. It's not to be productive. It's not to make money. It's to do the thing. And I feel like we kind of have to recapture that all the time, because we're so bombarded with this idea, like, oh, you're good at that, you should monetize it.
Right. And I think a lot of that too is with social media. We think about Instagram and stuff, and it's like, yeah, everything needs to, well, how much are you getting paid? How's that? I had some people ask me that about the book. It's like, so, how much you gonna make from it? How much do you think you'll make? When do you think you'll do the next one? And I'm like, I'm just on this one, and I want to deal with this one. So yeah, I think a lot of it is that, and we have to figure out how to step away from that, how to say that I'm doing this because I'm passionate about it. I'm doing this because I want to help other people feel their passion and to feel the void in their lives, not because, I want millions of dollars. We know, and we're not Stephen King,
Right.
So yeah, so I just think we just have to figure out what it is we want and just sort of drown out all of that for a minute.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't even tune into it. I just let it rest on the side because it'll influence you, how you think, is this good enough or should I be talking about this topic? Because look what they're saying on here, this is getting a lot of hits. And so, yeah, it'll really mess with your head. So you just have to give yourself some time and some grace and step away from it for a minute and just say, I'm good enough. I'm good enough.
Yeah. And I think that's it. I mean, especially for people newly coming into a creative field. I mean, I wish I could remember the source of this. I should go look it up and make a note on my computer about it, because it's, when you first start any creative endeavor, if you have an interest in that thing, your taste is going to exceed your level of talent at that point or your level of proficiency at that point. So you can go to a museum and go, that's a beautiful painting, but you're not there yet.
Right.
You have to build your craft. It's true with writing. It's true with anything. And I think it can be really discouraging for people when they first come to it. It's like, I write fiction. I'm not Neil Gaiman. Neil Gaiman's writing Neil Gaiman's books. I'm writing my books.
Right, right.
And yes, I love reading his books and I, enjoy his philosophy of writing and all of that. But at the end of the day, I'm the one who has to sit down with my computer and write my book.
Right, right. I've had people say that to me. Do you think it'll be the next jambalaya? Because Louisa teaches from New Orleans. And I go, well, I think it'll be what it's supposed to be. It'll be its own entity, because I'm not her, just like you said, and I just feel like my book will have its place, just like hers did. I mean, hers resonated with me and it made me feel very empowered when I first read it. And so I would hope that mine would do that for people as well, but I'm not trying to chase her down,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that I agree. We start at a certain point and we build even in our practice. And once we get to that point where we feel as though we can actually share, what we know and what we've gone through, then you write a book or you write something and you share it with people. But not until that point, and then when you're sharing it, it's your story. You own it. It's yours to share. It's no one else's. And so there's no one else like it and no one else like you who are going to tell your story the way you can tell it.
Yeah. No, I agree so much. So agree. But I do wonder, for you, writing the book in your own personal practice, how do you decide as a writer, what you want to share and what is just for you? I know in some traditions, especially there's things you can't share outside the tradition. Obviously, they're either oath bound or part of close practice. But just in your personal practice, the things you develop for yourself, how do you decide I'm willing to share this with people and let them experience this and this is just for me? How do you figure that out for yourself?
I guess for me, usually if it fits the topic and something that I've gone through, then I'll just share. I don't have a problem with the sharing of things, only if it involves other people, and I didn't, get their okay, to share that. Or if I think that it's something that, would make them feel a certain way, about it, I wouldn't share that. But if it involves me and my association with other people, I would usually ask, is this okay? Because a lot of times some of the workings in there are things that have been worked through with clients, and so I'll ask, is it okay to share this story? Because I think it'll be helpful to other people. And in most cases, it's yes, And if it's not, then I don't do that. I won't share that situation, even if it does involve me as well as them. I won't do it. But for me, I don't mind sharing because I think that a lot of things that I have gone through and I figure that I've seen my way through them. I feel like they'll help other people. And so I don't mind, imparting that to them,
It always amazes me how, like, sometimes the thing that seems the most personal can be so universal. And
yeah, I believe that. Yeah, because, we think that a lot of times that it's just us. And then we find out that, oh no, this person has gone through that too. Talking about things like, rape and different things like that. Any type of assault, is something that even if it hasn't personally happened to that person, they may know someone that they had to help through those type of situations.
Yeah.
So I think things like that, homophobia, situations like that are things that are common ground, especially now. And so just the telling of that story would be something that would help someone else, figure out, how they're going to address their situation with the people who are making them feel, traumatized and things like that. So I always feel like if it can help somebody, then I wouldn't mind sharing it. Yeah. It's not to, receive a lot of likes or, oh, that'll be a great story. That'll make a lot of money. No, it's always to help.
Yeah. Like in service of something.
Yeah. Because we're some people are just afraid and they live with it, live with the fear, live with the stigma, live with feeling alone. And just to let them know that you're not alone,
Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about, and you don't have to talk about this if you don't want to, but you bring it up in the book, is kind of the process of getting this book into the world. And like initially having some pushback about like, why do we need this book? I can't market you because you're not like a goth looking white lady talking about magic or, all those things.
I was told that.
So, which I was like, it just kind of made my heart hurt when I read it. And I was like, yeah, but I know it's true. Yeah. So what was that process like for you to bring this
crazy.
into the world?
I guess research, we always research and I have lots of Llewellyn books and lots of Weiser books on my shelf and Hay House, all of them. But just trying to figure out where to go, who would be the best place for it, and things like that. And sending it out, just taking my chance and just being told, we have white people who already written that, what makes your story so different. And you after, I guess, about the first few times, you're like, I guess I'll have to do it myself, which is what my husband was saying, right? He was like, well, you could just do it yourself. I said, well, I'm going to try a few more venues, and see. And it was a lot of the same thing. I was told, don't get an agent, because if you get an agent and you're a person of color, the big wigs will never take you on. That's what I was told. Yeah. And it was just crazy. It was a lot of, if you look like, if you had red hair or you look like this, or, you're a white woman, we could do it quickly. Or you were a white male who was gay, we could get it out there, and I'm like, really? Do people really say that? And so I was about to give up on it, just do it myself at a later date. And then I decided I'll try Llewellyn. Now, I had a person tell me that, Llewellyn won't like the sex magic parts in there. Yeah.
Have they read Llewellyn books lately?
Right. That's what they kept telling me, right? And so they were like, they won't like that. They'll probably tell you to take that out. And I said, well, I'm going to do it anyway. So I did it. And a couple of weeks later, I wasn't even thinking about it. I think I was probably talking to my daughter or something. And they said that they wanted it, and I was like, well, okay, all right. And that was it. We just started talking more, working with it. And then this other person said, well, they'll say they want it. And then they'll hold it up and it'll be 3 years before it gets out, And I just thought, okay, this is crazy. I'm going to stop talking to you and then, just work on this book. And at each, step, I guess a little bit, I was kind of nervous and thinking, I don't know how this process is going to go. Do they really want the book? Like I said, people get in your head and it worked out well. I liked everything that they were doing, step by step, even down to the cover art. I wanted it to be something that I felt like would really pull women in, women of color. And we were talking and they were like, well, give me some ideas. And And then they sent me some artwork, and this lady, her stuff is so beautiful. And I was like, okay. They were like, choose one. And I was like, okay. And so I asked my husband, I said, you look at it too. And he was at work, and I said, you choose one too, and we'll see. And we both chose the same one, the same cover.
Nice.
And so, yeah. And so I feel good about it. I feel like they allowed me to keep my voice. And, at first, when the section where I talk about, is it for everyone? And I was like, well, when I was talking to the editor, I was like, well, do you want me to not say that? And she was laughing. She was like, no, you need to say that, because I thought about it that night. I was like, well, is that going to turn them off? Is the F-bomb's going to turn? And they were like, no, do it. It's your voice. And so, it just worked out that way. Because that really is who I am. So I just feel like that was captured, and it stayed.
Yeah.
In that avenue.
The cover is beautiful. The cover art is gorgeous. I
love that one. I love that one. I kept thinking, I don't know, is it too much? And my husband said, I picked that one too.
Well, I just like the expression is like, I think depending on where you are is kind of how you read it, because it could read as like just absolute ecstasy or despair, either one. Yes. Like it's really you're bringing what the emotion is to it.
Yes.
And I was like, that's powerful.
Yeah. And that's what I thought. I thought that it could be, you have moved past a situation, or you're looking for help for that situation. Yeah. So yeah, I was in awe of that picture, and I thought, wow. Yeah.
And it's just so nice. I mean, I think, I've published 5 books, and we publish, my husband and I have a little publishing house. And so we publish, we're publishing other people's books. And every time the cover comes together, like for my books or for other people's books, I'm just like, it just feels so magic to me. Like this is the face of this book in the world, Right. And I just hope it never gets old. Like I don't want it to ever feel old.
Right. I told my husband we're going to have to go to every bookstore we can find, and we're just going to stand by and take pictures. So, yeah.
Are you doing some events or anything around the book coming out? Or
yeah, I wanted the first event to actually be at Community Book Center in New Orleans, where I'm from. And because when I was even in undergrad, it was probably my home away from home when I wasn't at the library. And I love that bookstore. And so they were like, and I'm like, it, I'm coming there first, And I just feel like that was where I bought my first J. California Cooper book, And so, yeah. And the colors on that book are similar to the colors on her book, the first book that I bought. So I just, that'll be my first one. And then we'll see what we'll do after that. But I plan to do, lots.
Well, I hope all of that is wonderful and amazing. And I understand from your podcast that you have an agent now.
Yes, I do. I have one.
So you
now.
are agented despite what people told you.
And I told her that story. She's like, what? I wish somebody would. We go to court.
Well, I wonder if it's this idea that, there's the reason that writers have agents, right? It's to help you negotiate better contracts.
Right.
Because they get a cut, right? So they want a better contract for you too. And I was like, well, is it easier to take advantage of somebody that doesn't have an agent? Yeah, our publishing house is small enough, and we do print on demand. I would work with someone who had an agent, but we haven't yet. Actually, one of our upcoming writers does have an agent, but we negotiated the book directly with them. So, it's before they had an agent, I should say. We were already in talks before she had an agent. Right. But I don't want anybody to think we're scamming her agent.
Oh no, I get you. I get you. I guess, and I guess that was my big thing in terms of, just not feeling like you have a, record contract,
Yeah, like you're being taken advantage of. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I signed a record deal and now I'm in poverty.
Right. And it was probably, I saw on Twitter, God, I can't remember his name now, but he put up this tweet about, feeling like he was just being railroaded by his publisher. And I was like, oh my God, I know him, from the internet. And I'm thinking, what happened? And it was going on and on and on. And then finally the next few weeks, I think he had an agent and he stopped talking about the whole thing. But it just makes you wonder, I guess, am I I'm being of service to everyone else. It's the publishing company being of service to me, in that way. And not to say, like I said before, that you want, you expect this, $1 million, but you still want to feel like, what I'm saying, that you're not being taken advantage of.
Exactly. I mean, I don't think, there are obviously authors who make a living writing books.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're out there. A lot of them, we know their names, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I think if your approach to, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to be a millionaire.
Right.
It's kind of like you're saying, I hate to be the full-bladdered witch pissing on your parade.
That's right.
That's probably not what's going to happen. I mean, it could. Lightning could strike. I mean, it could hit any of us, right?
Right.
But, the reality is that there's like 1 million books published a year.
That's right. So, yeah, no.
I mean, it'd be great if we could all strike gold. But, and I feel like, the publishing industry is in such turmoil right now anyway. Like, it's just a weird time to walk into things. It very much
so is. Yeah.
But I think writers talking to each other is very important. Like, I love that the platform formerly and always known as Twitter, the conversation that I want to say N.K. Jemisin and some others started about what was your advance?
Yes, I remember that one.
Yeah. And just talking about like, all things are not equal. And let's talk about why. But you can't have that conversation about why unless you talk about what's actually happening. Right.
I remember that one. And I think, for me, like I said before, it's just not to be taken advantage of, to feel like, that it is, it's held as I guess in sacred regard as I can, hold it in, my words, the image, how it's the marketing, those kind of things that, I just don't want it to be a book that's done and nobody's pushing it, except me, that kind of thing. Those are things to me that are, I guess, of greater importance than, trying to make $1 million. I want to make sure that it gets where it needs to be and that you're working with me to make sure that it gets where it needs to be and not just saying, okay, we published this person of color and so we're good,
Yeah. Like we've checked a box.
Just sitting there. Right. Check it off, Yeah. And so that is what's important to me. And that for me is why I felt like I wanted an agent, because I wanted to know that those kind of things like that were being handled,
And how to negotiate for them. I mean, I think, if you're writing a book, unless you're a, copyright lawyer, are you going to know a lot of this stuff? I mean, you're going to be green walking into this.
Exactly.
And we all are when we first start. I mean, there's still stuff I learn as a publisher all the time.
Right. And like you were saying about reading your, for the audiobook, doing your own. And that was something, and a friend of mine was like, oh, she's a lawyer, right? She's an entertainment lawyer. And she's like, yeah, we could do that. We could so do that. If you want to go somewhere, we could negotiate that. And I thought, I didn't think about that before, I didn't. Yeah. And I talked to another author and she was doing her own, and I was like, that's something in the future that I wouldn't mind doing. I don't have a problem with someone else, but I think that for me, I would feel comfortable, with those terms and those words and the way I say them, to do it myself. But those are things, like you say, are things that an agent would bring to the table, would know and remember to bring to the table. So things like that, are really the reason why I felt like I wanted somebody who knew that arena better than me. I mean, I can write it, but I don't know all the other stuff, that go along with it.
Exactly. Well, and especially when you get into like derivative works and translations and, audiobooks, like that's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of stuff to think about when you're signing a contract.
Yeah, that part. I was like, oh, so there's something else that has to go with that, even if it's translated. I don't know. I see their books when people put their books up and they're you recognize the cover, but then it's in a different language, So but I never just the background behind all of that, how that works, how you work that into a contract. I don't know that, so I felt like I needed someone who specialized in that area.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you found somebody. That's awesome. Congrats.
Thank you.
I feel like getting an agent is almost like as good as getting published in some ways.
Yeah, it really is, because you enter all these contests, right? There are all these tests, and it's weird. But
that is awesome. Well, cool. Well, we try to keep it to an hour, but since you're a listener, you also know that doesn't always happen.
That does not happen. Not happen, Victoria.
Oh yeah, because we get to talking, and it's just easy to keep talking.
And that's funny because I always go and see how long was this one. Oh, they went over. This must be a good one. I always do that. I always go to hurry up and go to the end.
Oh, good to know. Good to know. Well, I don't want to shortchange anybody who did go for an hour. Sometimes people are pressed for time, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to just kind of plug what you've got going on. This will air like at the beginning of December, so the book will have been out for a little bit. And if you got any events or anything at that time, or where people can find you, and then we'll do our game of chance.
Well, people can find me at Mawiyah Bomani on Facebook, as well as Twitter, Yawoya, Yawoya. You can find me there, on Instagram as well. And I'm still working and writing, but I'll be probably doing some events and I'll be posting that soon. So there'll be lots of opportunity to, talk to me about the book, to probably get me to sign the book, things like that. So yeah, and classes will be coming real soon too as well.
Awesome. Well, and we'll have links for your website and all that good stuff in the show notes. So that our last question is a game of chance. And I always joke that, my writer Scorpio nature is to not really know how to do small talk, and why I started a podcast. So I'm going to roll a die, and depending on what number I roll, you'll get a question about death, sex, religion, politics, or money.
Oh, all right.
And if I roll a 6, you get to pick which one you want. And I had so much fun writing questions for you. So,
okay.
5, money.
Okay.
Good? Or want to try again?
Money's
good. Okay. So I think about, and reading your book, so much books, TikToks, YouTube videos about magic is about money, sex, and love, right? And I said, I love that opening of the money chapter about being a full-bladdered witch pissing on your parade. You also have to grind to get some of these things you want. So, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, but a lot of people kind of go into this place where they think, I'm going to make my fortune in magic and the occult, taking clients, writing books, selling materia magica that they make, whatever the thing is. What would you tell those people walking into this, as a practitioner, as someone who takes clients, who are coming in with the mindset that there are riches to be made? What would you tell them?
Well, first of all, I would say that especially in African traditional spirituality systems, you have to go through divination. And so you may not always be considered a person who can divine for other people, so that might not be your path, because we've had lots of people who think, oh, I'm going to get in here, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to be, an Oshun priestess, I'm going to do all this stuff about love and sex, right? And so they get in and they find out they're an Obatala priest, or something else, So I would say first you have to see what the spirits say, and it may not be your path. If it is your path to do that, then you need to first settle into it. It's not about the money, because, once spirit, gets a hold of you, you're going to figure out that, you have a calling to do, you have work to do. And a lot of times before you can work for other people, you have to work on yourself. So you have to really sort through all of those things. And usually those people who run into it thinking that they're going to make a lot of money, they start to see that that's not exactly what's happening. They have this spiritual awakening, so to speak, and they figure out that I have to do some work. I have to work on me. And part of working on me is this whole idea, this notion that I'm going to make all this money, and that fanfare leaves. And so then they can do the work of the magic for others. Yeah. I always look at it like it's this neurosis that you need to get off of you, this whole thing of I'm just going to, make all this money from it. And I'm going to pocket this money and I'm going to have this channel. I'm going to do all these things. And no, you have to get through that. That's baggage that you've got to work through. That's your area, that you need to cleanse first.
Well, and I think when I've thought about this a lot, I have not worked with clients usually. I mean, it's just not part of my reality. Right. I've done charity readings, at events and stuff. And, I always feel like when you sit down across the table from someone or across a mat or whatever, however you're divining for that person or talking to that person, you are entering a space where they're going to tell you things they may not ever have told anyone else. Even if it's just at a charity event, Like
Yes.
stuff will come out in that space that you've set up. And for me, like walking into that, like is such a huge responsibility. Like it can't be about money. It's got to be
No, it
about
can't.
service,
It
or
can't.
you can do real damage to someone.
Right, right. I mean, it's just like you're a doctor, a teacher, you're all of these things rolled up into one, you have their stories, you have their fears, you have all of that at your disposal. And just like you say, you can do damage to them.
Mm-hmm.
You can do damage to their families, all of this thing, so you really have to think about how you're going to handle that. And then if you're somebody who, you do this on a regular, there's no way that you're going to be able to do all of these, readings and make all of this money, because you're going to have time to cleanse yourself and step away from this, because we put a lot of who we are into our readings, into our work. We put a lot of energy into it, and you have to move away from that, and you have to go take a walk, go take a bath. You have to do something else, maybe not even, do any more readings for maybe the next week or so, sometimes to get that off of you,
Yeah.
And so there's no way that you can go into that unless you're scamming people, to making all this money.
Yeah.
And there are lots of scammers out there. We know that, but, if you're really about the work, then you're not in it for the money. You can't be, because, you're not going to make that. There's no way to make that. What you're going to have $1 million worth of, love, for people, hopefully, and hopefully by you extending that out to them, they can extend that out to someone else, and triple your value, so to speak.
Well, I think that is really important too, to think about, like when you make a decision to see clients, it's not like the 15 minutes you get with your general practitioner. Like you got to spend time with that person to really do that. So it isn't like just churning people through your day.
And I always
like there's no way to do that.
I always tell them, I say, look, if they ask me to do a past life reading, it takes a lot of work, to do that. I do a lot of Black Mirror readings. And so I tell them, look, I have this person lined up. I may not be able to get to you for a while. If you need to go to someone else, that's okay. And I can recommend some people. I don't have a problem doing that as well for people. But, I'm not one of those back to back to back to back kind of people. Certain readings take a lot of work and they take a lot of energy out of me. So I'll let people know, if you feel like you can't wait, then I can recommend someone else who I know who's really good,
Yeah.
So I do a lot of that because I think that, if somebody comes to you, they're really in need. And so I want them to know that, there are other options, I'm not trying to hoard anything. And that, I guess that would be something, if somebody was trying to make a lot of money, then they would say, come on, just wait, I do a lot of, referrals as well.
Well, I think, as someone who would seek out a diviner of some kind, for whatever reason.
Right.
Like if someone said, I'm really busy, but if you need this, here's another person you can go see, I would automatically trust that person more. And just be like, oh, they are concerned about me getting what I need more than they are concerned about getting my $200 or whatever.
Right.
So,
Right.
No, I love that. Awesome. Mawiyah, thank you so much for being on. This has been
thank you
amazing, and I've just so enjoyed our conversation and your book. And
I have enjoyed this as well.
Want people to go buy it and read it.
My husband was like, "So what are you doing?" And I said, "She has the best podcast."
Oh, thank you so much.
I said, "So I have to do this. I have to do this."
Oh, that just really. I mean, you said that before we were recording, and it really means so much to hear that.
Not lying. I love it.
Thank you so much.
I love your podcast. I love just, how you put us on Front Street, and you just love books, and I can feel it, So when you say this book, you like this book, or you talk about it, I go out and get it or order it or put it in my car.
Well, so, other writers who are listening, this is a reason to be on the show. I will totally front your book.
Because you don't see that often. You know what I'm saying? Rarely do I see, where we get our books reviewed. And so I just love your space.
Well, thank you. It means a lot to me. And I really do. I mean, part of what I wanted to do in the podcast is I really do believe all boats rise when we work to do that. Like when we big up each other as writers, we all win.
Right.
The more people reading, the more books we can all sell. The more, the more information we can get out there. It's all good. And I just want to hear other people's stories too. So awesome.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
All right. Well, Consider yourself invited. Next book already. It's just,
Yay.
it's out there. So and we'll do this again.
All righty. Thank you.
Awesome.
Say hello to the hubby.
Yeah. WitchLit is a production of Thousand Volt Press and is edited by Julian Rashke. Our intro music is Cosmic Glow by Andrew Kay, and our outro music is Voices by Alexander Shenekar. Sue Fertal edits our transcripts, which are available with all of our previous episodes at witchlitpod.com. You can follow us on Instagram and Threads at witchlitpod. Please help other witches find us by leaving a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening to and reading WitchLit.